evening, and thank you for joining our heart to heart conversation today, where we are joined by the one and only Renee Bradford, who is the author of a wonderful book called Nothing Wasted. Renee is the Senior Manager and Hybrid Cloud Programs and Alliance Manager for SoftChoice. She has been an industry leader for 25 plus years in IT, working for a number of organizations and bringing her unique style and professionalism and just grace to every position that she has served on. And so with this, I am so grateful to have you here, Renee, and I welcome you to today's heart-to-heart discussion.
Thank you so much, Danette. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. So, for those of you who don't know about Healthy Heart Nation, we are a nonprofit and we are focused on eliminating the health disparities as well as other disparities within the Black community. And so, what we've done is brought together a large portion of almost over 100, actually 100 different ambassadors in the area of health, education, business, and justice. And so we're bringing our thought leadership together to be the pillars of the community, and we support various different community initiatives. And so one of the initiatives that we have as an organization is to ensure that we are getting our voices heard and our stories told. And so Renee is a business ambassador for us, and she has written a book entitled Nothing Wasted. And so, Renee, we want to talk to you about your book, but more importantly, we want to talk about you. And so I have some questions for you. And so the question of who am I is something that I feel that we are always asking ourselves, right? So who is Renee?
Well, I'm going to start with I was born in the Boogie Down Bronx, New York, and I lived there probably, I'm going to say half of my life till about 9 or 10. And then I moved to Jamaica, Queens with my grandparents. I am the product of a mother who was a fabulous, beautiful woman who dressed, and she was just impeccable, and we were impeccable. We lived in the projects, but we were just not of the projects. My mom just exposed us to everything that New York had to offer. Yeah. Then when I lived with my grandparents, I had the privilege of being raised by a man and a woman of just integrity and morals. My grandfather was in the military man, and my grandmother was initially a single mom, raised two children, and then met him later in life. And the two of them were just rock solid. And their whole purpose when we got there was all about making sure that we were provided for, we were safe and secure, me and my brother. And so I am a product of love. I'm a product of, I think, a person of forgiveness and grace, yes. And I'm a person that always looks at the cup as half full. I'm very optimistic. I always feel like there's a better way, there's a better answer. If something bad happens, something good is going to happen. So I'm always, anytime you talk to me, that's what you're going to get.
Okay, so it sounds like you are optimistic and you are hopeful and you are positive. And in terms of the future, you don't see it as anything that is limiting. Is that correct?
Not at all.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So what are some of the reasons that you decided to write this book?
Wow. Well, for one, I lived everything in this book, but I really never at the time thought of it as some book or something, really. I would say I knew some things were a little unique, but at the same time, as I've gotten older, as I've grown in my life, everybody's gone through something, right? Yeah, right. So what made me write the book was that I started realizing that I had gone through something and I'm at such a different place in my life, and people were looking at me and assuming, oh, you must have been born with the proverbial silver spoon in your mouth, or, you came from privilege. And I'm like, wow, really? I mean, and it also helped me to see that there's a lot of people that are still living in, really traumatic or just situations that happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Still, they're 50 years ago, they're 2010, and they're still
Mm-hmm.
kind of reliving or living in the limit of that
Okay.
situation. So,
Okay.
the purpose of writing the book was to say, we all go through something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving my story and my example of, but I can see all the kind of blessings and the gratitude, and the
Mm-hmm.
end result was good. And so that's what I choose to focus on.
Okay. And so it sounds like because of the way you lived your life, people made assumptions that your life must have basically mirrored how you were living it
Yes.
in the present state. And so, it took a lot of those experiences happening to you for you to decide, hey, maybe, people do need to hear the details of my story, and it might be something that could benefit them as well. So it sounds like you wrote the book, for something that you needed to do for yourself and for others.
You
Is
know
that
what?
pretty
For me,
okay?
it was interesting. I kind of, if you read the book, you'll see. I kind of,
Mhm.
when things happen, I'm like, okay, just like I said, I'm optimistic. But part
Mhm.
of the optimism is like to face forward and
Okay.
not really like dwell in the past.
Mhm.
So really, I was, moving forward and just always facing forward. And my husband has been saying for the last almost 40 years, you need to write a book. Like, you need to write a book. You
Right.
need to write a book. And then during the pandemic, I kind of felt that, a lot of people have advice and self help and counseling.
Mhm. Mhm.
And for me, it came to me, you should write this book and you don't have to say anything. Let
Mhm.
the reader read it and insert themselves and figure out for themselves maybe where they can see a mirror for themselves and maybe say, you know what, I can look at my life a little differently now. But just tell your story, and that's enough.
Mm.
That's
So
straight up enough.
just tell the story and not
Tell your
necessarily
story.
preach or
Right.
like, just
Just tell
to
the story.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
And that you did. I read the book probably in 2 days. I would have finished it in one night if I hadn't started so late. So it was a page turner. I enjoyed every bit of it, and just seeing the circumstances that you experienced and how you were able to overcome them was
Mhm.
extremely inspiring for me. And so, in the book, you shared many stories about events in your life that were devastating,
Mhm.
that were like really, really devastating situations, but you didn't let them break you.
Yeah.
How were you able to find your resilience?
Wow. Well, when I was younger, I started thinking in some of the moments like, okay, what can I do so this doesn't happen to me again? So
Okay.
for some reason, that young person, that's what I
Mhm.
thought. And
Okay.
so I thought, okay, I'm never going to be in this situation again in my young mind. And
Mhm.
so out sitting there just thinking in the middle of the situation, how can I prevent this situation from happening again? It's going to happen. What's getting
Right.
ready to happen is going to happen.
Mhm.
And how can I
Mhm.
live my life so it doesn't happen to my children or anybody
Okay.
else in my care or my, sphere? So
Mhm.
that's what I started thinking in that
Mhm.
situation. And I think that just kind of propelled me forward. Then in my spiritual journey, once I had
Mhm.
a spiritual relationship with God, I started living the principles that I learned in the Bible. But it's funny, prior to that, I didn't know it. And it was still the optimism.
Okay.
When I learned more principles, it's pretty similar. It's like,
Mhm.
what is it? Whatever you think, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Say things that you want, not things, say the things that you want to
Yes.
happen and those kind of things. And that's what I started doing. And I looked at education for me as kind of the tool, education, and,
Mhm.
really facing forward as a tool to help make it so I would not repeat those situations anymore in my family or anyone with anyone I knew. Just
Mhm.
always to look at the positive side and keep moving, keep one foot in front of the other. Like, you're going to go through something, you're
Yeah.
going to be miserable or not. And it was just, I've just decided I'm not going to be miserable. I'm going to,
Right.
I'm going to try and keep some joy. And that's what the optimism does. Like, okay, tomorrow's going to be a better day. Every day is
Right.
getting to that better day.
Nice, very nice. And like you said, like life and death is in the power of the tongue, right?
It
And so
is. It is.
it's
I learned
yeah.
that. Yes, it is.
And it's more about how you respond to things. You can't control what happens, but you can there's that saying that you can't control how you respond to it. And so it
Exactly.
sounds like those are philosophies that you practiced in your life. And as a result of practicing those things, it became possibly easier and easier. Would
Yeah,
you would you
it
describe it
was
like that?
part of me. Yeah, it became a part. I don't want to say easier because you're going through
Okay.
something.
Yeah.
I'm just like everybody else. I'm going through it. But I guess, it's like, well, I feel like you have two options. Like I said,
Mhm,
you can go through it negatively and
mhm.
blame everyone, or you can go through it hopeful. And some people say, well, what if it doesn't work out? Well, at least I was happy trying to make it work out, right?
Right,
So
right.
at least I was living my life joyfully, working to make it to the other side of the situation. So I
Okay.
have, I'm not miserable in the situation, miserable every day, miserable facing
Mhm.
forward. I'm facing forward from every situation with hopefulness.
Yes, and I have experienced that with you and in you. We work together on a daily basis, and just every interaction with you is a pleasure
That
and a privilege. And it's just, it's fun because there's going to be work. There's work that has to be done. We might as well have fun while we're doing it. And so I
absolutely.
enjoy every moment that I get to spend with you. So I just
Thank
want
you.
to put that out there as
Absolutely.
well. So, in sharing your early memories, was it hard to tap into the good and bad memories that resided in your brain when you decided to write the story?
Absolutely. What was amazing is, as I said, this forward facing person. But when I started to put this whole story together,
Mhm,
initially record the whole thing, what was amazing about it is it all came out in a concentric manner where it made sense, which I wasn't expecting. But
mhm,
then I realized it took, like, after I finished, started at least the verbal part of it, putting it all down.
mhm.
Um, it took me a couple of days to kind of gather myself back together because I
Okay,
remembered
okay.
every detail of everything. And
Mm,
then the other part that happened to me as well
mhm,
was I started realizing how many miracles had happened that
mm.
I didn't even realize, when you're younger, some of the things you happen and you're like, oh, that was nice. And when I'm like, wow, that was a miracle.
Right.
So I was even more grateful when I put all of
Mm,
it together and I realized how many times I was able to take a situation that was not good for, terrible for me, bad
mhm.
situation, and then turn it around to either be able to give a testimony, talk to
Yeah,
somebody, tell them a
right.
little bit of something, and say, there's better coming for you too, right? So
Right.
nothing wasted, as the book says, like not wasting experience because I was able
Yeah.
to then turn around and serve someone else with that.
Oh, absolutely. That's fantastic. And so the good and the bad kind of resided in there in your mind at the same time. And so you just basically balanced them when you were going through, your life and through those experiences. And so then when it was time to recount them, you kind of were you able to separate the two, or were you able to prioritize which story you wanted to highlight in the book?
Yeah, so the book, I feel like, is all about me and my experiences and my story. So I wanted to make sure that I told the stories and the circumstances that just were mine, about me,
Okay.
and
Mhm,
not
mhm.
highlighting
Okay.
any negativity on anyone else or
Mhm.
blaming anyone else. It's like
Right.
this is just a story about how you can overcome some traumatic
Mhm,
circumstances,
mhm,
in terms of how you view them, and how, if you really look back and start examining some of the things in this that has happened to you since then and where you
mhm,
are now, and you
mhm,
can say, you know what, I really have also had a lot of situations to be grateful for after that, or I can
mhm.
see kind of the hand of God moving in those scenarios as well. So I was able, when I brought it all forward, yeah, I was able to see a lot of even more reasons to be grateful.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was still traumatic situations, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I was like, man, there was a lot of goodness. And then I was able to also see how I was not able to waste those situations
Mhm.
when I started looking at how I was able to also turn around and maybe help someone else or provide them information or a word or
Sure.
something from a place of I kind of know. I don't know what you've been through, but I've been through something, and here's what I learned. Can
That
this
they
serve
can take it or leave it, right? But you're
right?
still able to share it because you were able to go through it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so in the book, you also talk a lot about your family and you
Mhm.
talk about the friends who become your family and who
Yeah.
have become your family, and how important they are to you and have shaped you in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
So, what can you tell me about these people in your life?
So without giving too much away, one, so when I say nothing wasted, I talk a little bit about I had an experience during a time of, I'll call it a financial crisis.
Mhm.
And then I had an experience where, I mean, I lost everything. And
Mm.
then in that, I learned some principles about fear. And
Mhm.
I was like, thought that whole thing was all about me. Then it turned around, and a friend that I had met that we became real close with their family, they had a child that was very sick. And the day it
Mm.
was diagnosed, she called me, her and her husband,
Mm.
and I tore those principles I learned out of my
Mhm.
notebook, took them with
Mhm.
me to the hospital, and literally read them, and had a glorious, beautiful moment with her in that moment.
Mhm.
And it was something that was able to serve her. And she was able to walk strong through the situation she had to endure.
Yeah.
So that was the nothing wasted in that
Mhm.
situation.
Mhm.
Um, and those friendships, that friendship means everything to me. I was able to go to her oldest daughter, who were her godparents.
Mhm.
She had her prom a week or two ago, so was
Okay.
able to go watch her daughter, head off to prom.
Mm.
So, you know,
Yes.
those kinds of things mean everything because it was a
Yeah.
situation where I was able to take some information I learned and pass it on. But when
Mhm.
I learned it, I was never sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to share this with somebody. I was in the middle of my situation and
Right,
my
right,
pain and my loss and I was just thinking, oh, wow, God, this is so amazing. I'm learning all this stuff. And I
right,
had to put one foot in front of the other. And it wasn't overnight. There was no quick fix. I had to
right.
walk it out. And
Yeah,
I did that. But in doing that, I was able to then turn around and share
yeah,
information I learned. So those kinds of friendships where I'm able to do that and times where I'm able
yeah,
to do that, that means everything to me. That's what it's all about, right? That's what it's all
absolutely. So I'm going to ask you if you could read the dedication page
about. Oh, wow.
in at the beginning of your book for us.
I will. This book is dedicated to anyone who's ever felt unloved, forgotten, or abandoned. Your journey may not look like what you expected or with the people you expected. Know that God is intentional and He orchestrated the right people in your path for you to accomplish your mission and purpose. Sometimes the very people that we start with or encounter on our journey are not equipped to take the entire journey with us.
Mhm,
The beauty is that God already knew that. And because He works all things together for good, He has placed other people and circumstances in your life to provide you with everything you need or ever needed.
mhm,
My goal in sharing my story and writing this book is to encourage you to take another look and see the blessings and people carefully and thoughtfully placed by the hand of God to fill those needs and take you through your journey. Nothing wasted. Nothing you experience is ever wasted. And then we have my one of my favorite Bible verses, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future.
it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
So,
I haven't read that in a minute.
so let's see. So today is a special day.
Yes, it is. It's funny
Today
when
is a special day, not just because we're having this discussion, but because it is your grandmother Fletcher's birthday.
yeah, yep, it's
And I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged her and, spent some time talking about her specifically. And
yes.
you have a chapter in the book called God's Plan. And I'm just going to read your description of your grandmother. And you say your grandmother was a beautiful, energetic, light skinned brown woman who kept her hair a light reddish brown color to complement her complexion. From the day we moved in with her, when people discovered that she was my grandmother, every last person would say, "Oh my gosh, you don't look like a grandmother. You look like her mother."
Yeah.
And so, in acknowledging Grandmother Fletcher today, what would you want people to know about her and her impact on you and your life?
You know, Irene, my grandmother's name was Irene, and she was just I called her kind of a bundle of energy, but she had raised two children that were grown by the time we got there. Her
Okay.
husband, Fletcher, he was her second marriage,
Okay.
and he had no children. So when we
Mhm.
came to them, me and my brother, he had never had children, but my grandmother, on the other hand, had raised two children, of which my father was one. And they were grown and gone, of course. And
Mhm.
so, what was beautiful about my grandmother was she felt that, hey, I did this before.
Mhm.
Whatever, I made mistakes, I wasn't perfect, but now I know what I need to do. And
Okay.
so she was just so confident. And it was, I will say, it was more of a strict, the principals in the home were strict,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it was funny. I would go to school and people were like, what? I mean, I talk a little bit about, I think a lot of my organizational skills I attribute to my grandfather. When I got
Mhm.
there, I
She was
think I was
military, right?
military. Everything was by
Yes.
time. 5 o'clock, dinner was on the table. I cooked every day, like maybe except Saturdays or whatever, or Friday nights and
Mhm.
Saturdays. But it was like, okay, the whole drill from, okay, so if dinner got to be on the table at 5, like work backwards.
So
You
problem
cooking,
solving, huh?
right? Cook. If you're gonna cook meat, then the
Right.
meat got to be defrosted by the time you got to cook it.
Yeah.
And look, faithfully every day, I wouldn't have it any other way. The dinner was on the table, so not like
Yeah.
now. I think we all run around. I know I do.
Mhm.
Hardly ever sit at the table, but at
Right.
5 o'clock, the table was set, and my grandfather would literally, like, everything was by time. At five
Mhm.
o'clock, he was pulling his chair up. There was just no question
Food or not.
about the
He
food,
was sitting there, huh?
and everything was like a meat, a starch, and a vegetable. Like it
Okay.
was, and
Yes.
I did my homework. No one ever said,
Mhm.
"Oh, you know what? You don't have to cook tonight. You got too much homework." It was, you didn't have those discussions. It was
Right.
like
Right.
your job. You got to cook. You got to figure out everything else. Figure it out.
Yes.
We never
Yes.
had
Problem
discussions.
solving and time management,
Yes.
right? Like,
So it was like, but for me at that time, it was like I needed that. I didn't realize, but I never was
structure.
like, yeah, I never felt like, oh my goodness. I almost felt like I absorbed it. I welcomed it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I like, if
Okay.
someone had an expectation of me, I knew
Mhm.
what it was, and it was like, okay, I can deliver on that. And that
Okay.
became like, I lived every day
Mhm.
never wanting to disappoint
Yeah.
my grandparents. Like, I meant that to my core. I never wanted them ever to wake up and go, why did I do this? Or I'm sorry
Mm.
I took them. So that was always my guiding principle. I
Okay.
wanted them to be proud of me, to be like,
Mhm.
yeah, look at Renee. So I lived every day um, in that manner with them. And
So
even now
the
I think about,
Mhm.
like, in everything I've ever done, I
Okay.
think that way.
Well, that makes me think about, like, in terms of people pleasing, was it something that you had, like that toward other people, or was it just
Mm.
primarily to them? Or was that something that was a challenge for you to learn how to manage as
Not
you
a
okay,
challenge, because
okay.
I think also
Are
coming
you
from
from New
the,
York? Because it was you're the New York and you kicked in with
no, not at all. But I did definitely want to make sure they were pleased. And I find sometimes, like even at work where, that managerial relationship, I had to be careful because, it's that same authoritarian, the way I looked at my grandparents. When I'm dealing
Okay.
with people like that, I just have to be careful. Like, they're not, I can now, I'm seasoned up a little better now, but initially I did
Okay.
look for that in those roles, right?
Okay.
But friends
Because
and
it
all,
worked for you, kind of, right? It worked
yeah,
for you, and
yep,
being in those situations. Okay.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So now you kind of cater it according to who the
Yeah,
people are
people
versus
pleasing
yourself.
now, yeah, that's
Okay.
off the table at this juncture of my life. But it was, there were times for sure. And again, work, I found it more in a work environment because
Mhm.
that's what I'm familiar with. I think one of the things
Mhm.
my grandfather put in me, that whole, regiment, problem solving, that's where I
Right.
feel like I'm comfortable, right? And
Exactly.
so that's where, when I'm in that environment, I'm like, okay, what do you need? What do you need? Tell me what you
Let's
need.
go.
I'm gonna
Right.
get it. I'm gonna get it done, get her done, as they say. So yeah, so that in that relationship, I learned early I probably had to be careful because I put a lot of
Okay.
weight
Mhm.
on that. And
Mhm.
we can talk about being, a black person in corporate America, being an only as an
Mhm.
engineer, being
Mhm.
an only female, being an only black, being an only
Mhm.
black female, all those kinds of um, fulfilling those kinds of roles. It
Mhm.
puts you in a situation where you really have to be careful because some people will never be pleased.
Right.
And so you have to like guard your heart and mind too, right?
Mhm.
Because some
Mhm.
people mean it no good in those situations. So I had to learn it's okay. I'm the only, and I have to view the situation differently. So I
Mhm.
learned that pretty quick, being
Okay.
put in these situations out of college. In college, I think
Mhm.
big learning lesson.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then I kind of, I would say, when I left college, I was kind of exhausted from
Okay.
the situations. And so when I got into the work world, I feel like I was like, okay, I get it. I get this, how I need to operate. And I
Okay.
realized, I can't put that weight like I did with my grandparents, because that was kind of natural. I want to make sure doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Tell me what to do, and I'm going to go do
Right.
it. And you're going to reward me, and I'm going to be pleased. And I learned that's not always the way it works.
So was it the pressure to be perfect, or was it the pressure to be your best? Like which
I
one
would say
was
it
it?
was the pressure to be my best,
Okay. Okay.
pressure to
Okay.
be my best, and to be recognized for that. And
Okay.
I quickly learned that that may not always be
Sure.
the way it is, but that I've given my best. And sometimes I have to know that that is okay. I know I've done that.
Mhm.
And that's my check. That's my
Okay.
check mark, right?
Okay. Is words of affirmation one of your love languages?
No, believe it or not, I was
I
shocked.
don't believe it.
I was shocked. Yeah, when I took that, it was physical, which was,
Okay.
but yeah, I do definitely, words of affirmation do mean a lot to me,
Okay.
especially, and well, I'm a New Yorker to my core though. So if
Mhm.
they're coming from people, I don't think, I'm like leery if you just throwing that at me, and I have no history
Right.
with nothing. They
You
used to
haven't
look at
earned
me
it.
like,
Right.
what you want, that kind of thing. So that's probably why I didn't come up on this.
That's funny. Okay, so what attributes do you recognize in you that lived first in your grandmother?
Wisdom,
Okay. Okay.
wisdom.
Okay.
Um, I would say gracefulness. She was graceful. Um, Also loving, um,
Mhm.
a good judge of character, and I am that as well. I am that, and you know, and I think I said forgiving. One of the things I learned once I was grown and spent time with
Mhm.
her as a married woman,
Mhm.
how many things she's forgiven.
Yeah.
Um, and I did not realize it. I took it, I would hear things and take it for granted,
Mhm.
but as she got older, she would really explain the stories.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, wow. And so I don't know, I had that in me anyway, but I'm
Mhm.
also like, you know what, forgiving and accepting. That was the other thing I learned
Yeah.
young.
Mhm.
I was kind of born into this world when people talk about all kind of we talk about LGBTQ and all that. I had an
Hmm.
Uncle Wendell and an Uncle Frank that
Yeah.
were together when I was,
Right.
you can remember, in my family, I didn't know any different. I
Right.
didn't know there was, and everybody, you treated them,
Exactly. They were
everybody,
in the family. Right.
right. And so when all this stuff's occurring, I'm like, oh, I'm Uncle Frank. I mean, it was all normal. So
Right.
my grandmother just, to me, one of the things she would tell
Embracing.
me
Right.
is, you love everybody. Your job
Yes.
is to just treat everybody fair and love
Hmm.
everybody.
Hmm.
God's the judge of any. If he doesn't like something, he'll figure that out. Not you.
Absolutely.
So I love and accept everybody, and that, when anyone that knows me, that's who I am.
Okay.
And I don't judge someone because of who they are, what they do. That's for them to do. I
Yes.
just love you because you're here. That's my
Okay.
job.
Okay, fantastic. So the stories in your book were powerful, but again, I did feel that they were brief. And so was the brevity like intentional?
When it start, no, I think some of it was. Well, I'll say it was, because in
Okay.
some cases, to go into more detail
Okay.
was to shine a light on someone
Someone else's
else's
story. Got it.
imperfection,
Got
and
it.
that's not what I was about, right? It
Okay.
was not.
Okay.
My whole purpose in writing a book
Hmm.
was, as in my dedication, for people who feel unloved,
Sure.
and who feel like, what, things didn't happen the way they were supposed to. For me, my life
Hmm.
is horrible. And
Right.
so if you're telling a story and it's shining a negative light on somebody else,
Right.
then you're kind of,
Sure.
you're not meeting your purpose. And so
Sure.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do
Okay.
that.
Okay. So
So
you
that's
kept,
why some of them were, because it would have started getting into other things. And, it was really a blessing that I was able to tell my story and
yes.
stories to a point where no one else's light was dimmed. And
Yeah.
that's just not who I am. I wouldn't do that.
Absolutely. It was beautifully written. So I'll say
Thank
that again. It was beautiful. So your professional career has also been amazing. Is there any advice you could offer our viewers as it relates to how to operate in integrity, from a professional standpoint, and to be
you.
true to yourself?
I would say, so I want to take two angles, Danette.
Hmm.
One is to say, for people who are in a place where they have the power to hire people,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, if you read my book, think about giving opportunities to other people that don't necessarily look like you, act
Yeah.
like you, may have not went to the same school as you,
Hmm.
but they went to school nonetheless. They have the goods, they have the opportunity, they have the potential.
They
So
just need a chance.
just
Right.
need a chance. It's
Hmm.
also a case of, look at me now. Someone had to give me the opportunity. And
Everybody.
so
Right.
that's one of the things I want people to take away from that perspective, if you're in a position to hire. On the
Yeah,
other
and
side,
before you move to from that, like if we're honest and we think about it and talk about it, everybody has been given an opportunity.
yes,
So the difference is that a certain section of society has been, just basically taught that they don't deserve it, and another sector of the community does. But in each situation, people are given the opportunity. They either do well with it or they mess it up, right? But
yeah,
either, whoever you hire, they're going to be given an opportunity. They're going to
whoever
be
you
given a
hire is
chance,
true.
and
That's
they're going to, either to like exceed in the position and do well, or not, and learn some lessons that they can take somewhere else. So I think
yes,
there is a lot of pressure a lot of times for a certain population, to feel that they have to be perfect, that they're only, that they're given these opportunities haphazardly. And again, every chance that you're given is an opportunity for you to be
yes,
successful, and it sounds like
absolutely,
that's what you've been able to do with the
yes.
opportunities that you've been given.
Yeah, so that is one of the, I would say I'm a good example of what happens when an
Mhm.
opportunity is given. I don't care if it was given based on a quota, based on a program,
Yes.
based on whatever it was. At the end of the day, when you look at me now, I'm still
Mhm.
contributing, I'm
Mhm.
still making a difference. and no one is wondering if I'm a quota or how I got here.
Sure.
The bottom line is every place I've ever worked from day one, I've been contributing. I've
Yes.
met the moment, met more than the moment. And so that's the key for anyone that's looking in a hiring position. If
Mm-hmm.
you're the person that's walking in as the employee or if you're just any person from integrity, morality, it's like you go in every day and you give it your best.
Yes.
One of the things I always say, my grandmother said to me, is leave a place better than you
Mm-hmm.
found it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means I don't always make every decision and every move just in the name of Renee and what I want and what I want to do. And you got to hear me now, and I'm going to scream and holler. I also think if when I leave this place, will someone else that looks like me be given an opportunity because of the path I paved? And
Okay.
that's how I look at what
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for as well. So it's not just about what's best for me.
Right.
And I've
It's a
made many
dual responsibility.
dual responsibility. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
always thinking I'm on the shoulders of so many people that
Mm-hmm.
came before me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard someone say, I'm living the life that my ancestors dreamed. I am
Absolutely.
in their dreams. I'm living in the home they dreamed of. I'm living in the job they dreamed of,
Yeah.
and worked hard, and some died and bled for. So
Yeah.
I think it little to just
Mm-hmm.
leave a place better. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Look at the cup half full. When a problem comes up, it's like, let's look at what we're trying to solve here. Let's step
Mm-hmm.
back. And right.
Right.
So it's not just screaming and yelling and demeaning
Mm-hmm.
people. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, how can we pull this together and work together? And so
Right.
when you work with me, that's what you're going to get. I'm not going to demean people. I'm going to speak the truth. I'm going to speak my mind, but you're not going to leave me feeling like you've been injured. You're going to feel like, okay, we got together and I feel like a
Right.
little better, a little stronger,
Right.
like I can
Right.
solve a problem a little better, not like, somebody just ripped you up and left
Right.
you on the floor.
Right, right. And so you said you kind of wanted to take the two angles. And are you comfortable with sharing the story that you shared with me that kind of happened at a soft choice meeting where it was kind of about the opportunities and you really kind of just were able to shed some light
Yeah,
without
so I can
naming
share.
names?
So I was in a meeting. We were having a meeting with one of the employee resource groups that I was in at the time.
Mhm,
And it came up in the meeting about how we could get more, different diverse candidates, women and minorities, etc.
mhm,
And
mhm,
everybody agreed about it. And then someone made a comment and said, "But you know what? I don't agree with quotas, and I don't agree with just giving people things like that." And
mhm,
I kind of raised my hand and said, "You don't agree with quotas? Let me tell you my story." And
mhm,
I told them how, hey, you know what? I lived a life where I was younger,
mhm.
where like I said, lived with my mom, lived with my dad, then ended up with my grandparents. You have to read the book to find out all happened in between. And in my life, I was not in a stable environment really
Mhm,
until I got to my grandparents. So I was probably
mhm,
10 and 11 before I was in a stable environment and really
mhm.
accepted it and felt that way.
Right,
And so, how if I'm taking a SAT test, which is based your
right.
English, your math, that
Mhm.
really is an accumulation of your knowledge
Right. And
of
experiences.
experiences,
Yeah.
I'm never going to score the same thing as somebody.
Who's been
Example,
conditioned.
my
Right.
child, one of my children that lived here in a family with a mother and
Mhm,
father and
mhm.
nurturing and etc. And
Right.
so I said, so when I went to college, I was there was a program I was in at University of Pittsburgh
Mhm,
that was for minority students who
mhm.
had, say, if there were five things you needed to get in the school, you have four.
Right.
Your grades were there, but your SAT score was not as high in one of the math or science, or
Okay.
math or English. And so I was one of those students.
Mhm.
I went through the summer program and ended up matriculating in and graduating. And I said, but if it wasn't for that program, which was about quotas,
Yeah.
if it
Right.
wasn't for that, I would not have been given the opportunity. And so,
Right.
should I not? You work with me now and you see me
Mhm.
now, and
Right.
now that you know my story, would you not think I should have gotten that opportunity? And so the whole room went completely silent. And later, each person at that table that day,
Mhm.
the next day, came to me and was like, wow,
Right.
like you made that so real by telling your story and
Mhm.
telling us about what you have been through. I would have never guessed that, but by you sharing that, it gives me a new light on how we need to look at the situation, each person. And that is that's another reason I started learning the power of sharing my
Yes.
experience versus
Yes.
preaching. Let me share
Yes.
my story. And that,
Right.
when I saw that moment and every person in the room, and then later,
Mhm.
I was asked to film a spot that still sits on our, I think, homepage
Yes,
today,
it does.
about my experiences and
Mhm.
how I looked at them and why you need to look at people
Yes.
and give them an opportunity,
Mhm.
so that you have people that work with you that resemble the world. We're all different. No one's the same. So yeah,
Right, and that comes from sharing, right? And
yes,
that comes from creating an environment where people feel comfortable enough to share those types of experiences with the people that they work with and the people, across the aisle, and
absolutely.
so but that takes trust and that takes time and that
Yes,
takes intention, right? For
absolutely.
just to name a few, right?
Absolutely.
So you are also married to an amazing man
Yes,
who
I
matches your commitment in every way,
am.
God, family, community, etc. What
Yes.
advice can you give for those looking to make this type of decision in the future?
Wow, I'm gonna say I was blessed. First of all, me and my husband both said we're glad we met in college, right? We had nothing, we started with nothing, and
Mhm.
everything was like we went through everything together, right?
The
Um,
bottom and now you're here. That
yeah, started at the bottom. For real, like no broom, no no broom, no pot, no plate. Like
right.
literally,
Hmm.
that I will say one of the biggest things that I learned,
Hmm.
that was important to me was watching my husband with his family,
Yeah.
and just watching him, how much he loved his mom.
Hmm.
His mom was a single mom. And I knew his dad though, but his mom raised him by herself, his dad, his whole family. But I watched him. I watched how his family would get together. And I
Hmm.
just kind of became a part of the family actually before we got married
Right.
almost.
Right.
But
Right.
so that kind of, the friendship, the love that
Hmm.
we were able to kind of have prior, we still have that friendship now, right?
Yeah.
So
And
that
so
was
his
one of the
family
things.
life mirrored the kind of life you
Yeah.
wanted to have as
Yeah.
well in your future.
Yeah, and I shared,
Okay.
it's funny, the one
Mhm.
person that I shared my entire story with was him
Okay.
as a friend when we kind of first met.
Mhm.
For some reason I told him it, and I said it kind of matter of fact, told him it, and he was like, "You went through all of that?" My
Yeah.
goodness. And then I just kept going. We went on about our business, but he was always like, you don't say, like, I don't. Someone said, "You don't know what I've been through." I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay." Like, but
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I moved on from that.
Yeah.
However, I think
Yeah.
it was important I shared that story. I didn't know it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I watched him and I saw a mirror to me, someone that, again, felt like family was important,
Yeah.
making sure not only their family was taken care of in terms of the love and whatever they had, but if
Yeah.
they had a family, how they would be
Sure.
about that, right? Because I could see that
Right.
as well.
Right.
And then just how protective he was of me as a person and how much he loved me. I don't know that there's a secret sauce for
But
that.
it sounds like, I mean, because I've heard some other people kind of talk about, how they're going to go about things, like a lot of younger people,
Yeah.
and they don't maybe necessarily understand the value of being able to be an observer of people's
Yes.
lives
That's
before
a
it
good point.
matters,
That's a
right?
good
So you
point.
want
Yeah.
to kind of go around their families or be able
Yeah.
to go around their friends, not
That's a good
just in
point.
the good times, not just at the weddings, but the funerals. You need to be able to go, you need to be able to go
Yes,
to all of these types of things to really see what you're going to be getting as much as possible, because it's not some magic formula that once you're married, everything is going to be perfect. You have to work through your family backgrounds, your family experiences.
exactly.
Everybody's been raised differently. And so you've got to be able to try to bring those things together, but it helps if there's some commonality
I think you're
in the
right
person
about
you're with.
that. I definitely think
Mhm.
you're one of the big things. I definitely, you kind of said it, is I didn't know I was doing it, but spend
Mhm.
time with
Yeah.
their family, get
Mhm.
to know what they're like with their family. And
Mhm.
then he spent time with my family and got to know, and our families, by the way, are total opposites. Total opposites in terms of like, he's the youngest of eight. It was just me and my brother growing up. I have a sister as well, but we were raised
Okay.
different
Sure.
places.
Yeah.
I was living with my grandparents, as you can imagine, quiet. He's the
Mhm.
youngest of eight. His mom is like, if you just walk
Nothing's
in
quiet.
the door and you were there half an hour, it was a party because then other
Right.
brothers coming and other sisters coming, fried
Yes.
chickens, frying macaroni cheese. It's like, I would be like, if you just went over there, we're only going over there for 15 minutes. And
Right.
next thing you're there for like
All
10,
night.
6, and then you're telling stories, and I learned the
Yeah.
value of that. And so
Mhm.
yes, I saw all kind of sides and scenarios, and you learn things because they talk about your loved one, your man,
Yes.
your boo,
Yeah.
your husband, and you get and it's good to hear those things. It's good to see different sides, and you get to see how the family interacts and how they
Mhm.
interact. And
Mhm.
same on my side. So yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but we did
Mhm.
spend quite a bit of time on both sides
Yeah.
with both sides of the family.
Better understanding that.
Yep,
And you are the mother of two amazing daughters.
I am.
And you're on the other side of that relationship. You've gotten through preschool and diapers and high school and college and all of those things.
Yes.
Do you have any advice for those who are kind of at the early stages of being a mother and raising a family?
I would say, take it one day at a time. And as crazy as it sounds, enjoy every moment. Like, try to
Mhm.
enjoy the moments
Yeah.
and take time for yourself. Take
Mm.
some time to be a wife, a mother. You're doing
Mhm.
that, but
Mhm.
also take time to be a wife, to
Right.
be a woman,
Mhm.
to be away from it, some time to go away from it, to spend a weekend.
Yeah.
Create a village so that you can take some regularly scheduled times away, be it
Yeah.
hour here, hour there, weekend sometime, a
Mhm.
week. A lot of times we forget about those things. It's
Yeah.
hard to constantly be pouring in we're given to our children 24/7. You
Mhm.
got to take some time to replenish yourself. And a
Yeah.
lot of times we're last on our list. I know I was. And
Yeah.
just take some time, work it out, get people together, swap with other people so that you can just have some time where you're away from it and you come back recharged and refueled. And it also teaches your children
Mm.
that you know what, it's okay for mommy and daddy to take some time,
Yeah.
to have some time to themselves, because they'll have children one day and they'll need to model that and mirror
No, absolutely.
that.
So, you know that I've read your book. I loved it. I've shared it with so many people
Oh,
in
thank
my
you.
network. But if you were to, kind of give a quick synopsis of your book, how would you describe it?
Wow, I would describe it as, if you like, I don't look like what I've been through. So if
Okay.
you know me and you read it, you're like, oh my goodness, that's Renee. But if you haven't met me and you read it, it's just a great book in terms of really understanding a person's life that has gone through,
Mhm.
different circumstances that were difficult,
Yes.
young
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
even as a grown person,
Mm.
and seeing them come out the other side of them all,
Yeah.
like we all
Yeah.
can and we all do,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just that it's, I guess it's all interesting because it's all somebody, I took the time to write it down. You can insert your own stories and you'll be like, yeah, oh, wow, this is interesting. But it definitely is an interesting read because there are so many stories and it just kind of flows and it makes sense to you, the reader. And
Yes.
it is an uplifting. At the end, it leaves you with who I am, which is optimistic and uplifting. And I that's what I want to leave you with. And I think you also get left with, if you are having any situations in your life where you're like holding on to some unforgiveness or still living in something that happened a long time ago, I think it
Mm-hmm.
helps you to go, you know what, I can kind of maybe let that go because
Yeah.
let me look at all these other good things that came after that, right? Because
Sure.
that's what this book helps you do.
And I think I don't know if I have the quote right, but they said that forgiveness is the best gift you could ever give to yourself.
Yes, it
And
is.
so, a lot of times we're holding on to things and we're maybe hoping or thinking that we're punishing someone else as a result of it. But, we're the ones who really get the brunt of, that unforgiveness, the resentment, the
Absolutely.
anger, all of these things that we're holding on to that, you can't change the past, right? And so most of those things are based on the past. And
Yes, they are.
so when you go back and look at the past, again, that's not anything that you are able to change. But
Nope.
when you look back at on your past, what do you see?
I see, it's almost like a story of resilience, of
Mhm.
strength, um, and then of grace
Yeah.
as I grew to say, you know what? I can truly look at situations and that happened in the past and say, one of the things I heard is hurt people, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's true.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
other thing is, how dare I not have grace on someone
Mhm.
when I know I'm living every day. I'm sure I've done things. I know I've done things. Maybe I haven't done something to the magnitude of what was done
Sure.
to me and my
Right.
mind, right?
Mhm.
But at
Mhm.
the same time, you can think, some of us, maybe a parent did something to you or said something
Mhm.
to you that you're hanging on to, or you had a disagreement. And
Mhm.
it's like, now that you're a parent or now that you're grown, maybe you can think, you know what? Maybe they had some stuff they were dealing with or holding on to
Yes.
from their parents. Like,
There's no maybe, right? It's definitely,
it's
right?
definitely, I think a lot of
Right.
times we forget that we're all human and we
Mhm.
all are carrying something. And sometimes we haven't laid everything down and we think we can move on. And sometimes
Yeah.
we haven't, or we'll say something and we didn't mean it. And
Yeah.
sometimes somebody has done something to us, honestly, and they've forgotten
Mhm.
about it. And they
Right.
are sleeping well at night and they're not, and you are like miserable, ready to,
Yes.
and you could even go, I
Yes.
forgive you. And they're like, for what?
Right.
You
Right.
said I was fat. And they're like, I did. And you're like, but for the last 30 years, like the last 30 years, I've been mad at you. And you're like, I didn't know you were mad at me. I said,
Right.
you should have said something. I shouldn't have said that. It's
Yes.
amazing. You got a lot of people walking around
No,
with
very
things
true.
that people have said that they forgot and don't even
Mhm.
realize they said and will swear they didn't say. You
Yeah.
got a lot of situations where we're holding on to something, and
Mm.
those are simpler. There are other things where
Mhm.
people have done stuff. They've done it.
Right.
What happened where it was
Terrible
done.
things sometimes, right.
Yeah, and it's
Absolutely.
like, you know what? I can be mad, but at the end of the day, guess what? I ended up with my grandparents. I ended up with
Yes.
beautiful Irene and Fletcher. I ended up in the best place. I was put where I needed to be so
Okay.
that I can walk out this plan God has for my life, and I
Yes.
wouldn't change nothing. I wouldn't.
No.
And so, in
Right.
order to say that and feel that, then
Mhm.
I can't be in unforgiveness about anything. So
Nope.
I definitely would say I looked and said, you never know. Like, you look, my dad did what he best he could do, right?
Right.
And
Right.
he was like, I can't do this. So guess what? Yeah, you may not like how it all happened, but it happened. What if he would have tried to, raise us? What if he
Right.
would have? Oh
Could
my
have been worse. Right.
Right.
So,
So I ended
yeah.
up where with my grandparents who
Mhm.
that's what all day long that was their
Like, thank
focus.
you.
Yes, like not even to me, even me as a parent, I was thinking of 10 things working and
Yeah.
When I think of my grandparents, it's like my grandfather was kind of towards the end of, he's just routine. My
Sure.
grandmother towards the ends of their working years, and their
Hmm.
jobs at that time were more like routine type jobs. Like
Sure.
now we're bringing home work and all
Right.
that.
Right.
But it
Right.
was like my grandfather worked at Rikers Island as a cook from
Hmm.
4 to noon. So 4 in the
Mm.
morning to noon, and my grandmother worked 9 to 5.
Right.
There was always an adult in my house. It kept me out
Yeah.
of a lot of trouble. Did I get in
Yeah.
some? Yes, but probably 98% of things I would have done, I couldn't even do
Sure.
because
Right.
someone was home. My grandfather was home sitting behind the clock. And I had to be in at 3:30. Right? You better be in this hour, whatever time, 4:30, I forgot whatever. But
Right.
I came straight home, and a
Mhm.
lot of all my friends except me were latchkey kids.
Right.
I was in
Right.
high school,
Yeah.
and a parent sitting there waiting, and it was like, okay, I was on my
Where you
job.
at? Right. Where are you at? Well, I have really enjoyed our conversation. And my last question for you is there a volume two out there on the horizon? Because I feel like there's so many stories that you haven't told, and
There
not
are.
just from what you've already covered and Nothing Wasted, which is again a wonderful book. I definitely, you can get it on Amazon.
Yes, it's on
You can also
Amazon.
get it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it, and order your hard copy, or soft copy of the book. But is there another book on the horizon that might talk specifically about some of your work experiences and some of the things that you've encountered on that side of life?
Yeah, so one of the things I am looking at, I definitely have a couple of other book
Okay.
project ideas I'm working. And
Mhm.
I'm actually looking at maybe doing something a little bit more on a bigger scale around talking about overcoming life circumstances, or a
Okay.
discussion, be it a
Mhm.
podcast or something like that. So
That
something
would
where
be
there's a
great.
lot more interaction, where people can
Sure.
really have a place to really work through their problems, or work through the
Mhm.
situations, and hear
Sure.
more, even more, I'll call stories, testimonies
Yeah,
of people who have overcome some difficult circumstances, right? And
absolutely.
so then insert self, and maybe even a workbook or something like
Mhm.
that. So we've talked about
Okay,
that,
good.
because a lot of people are still working through, and it's okay
Absolutely.
if you're working through, or if you need to get
Mhm.
counseling or whatever it is. But
Mhm.
the thing is to move forward. And if you can't do it in your own strength, there are a lot of resources. Please utilize them so you can live your
Absolutely.
best life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for today. I really enjoyed it. Again, I want to encourage each and every one of you to go out and get Nothing Wasted by Renee Bradford.
Thank you.
It's a fantastic book. You will not regret whatever time you spend reading it. I've got bookmarks all through it. I don't want to give it away to anybody. I don't want to give any of the good stories away. They're in here. Go find them. Go get them out of this book. It's fantastic.
I
And,
love
I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for me personally,
it.
as well as professionally. And I also want to thank you for being my sister friend
Yes.
and just being my partner in everything that we do, especially
Yes.
Dee and I, and being an ambassador of Healthy Heart Nation and sharing your story and sharing your talents with the world.
Thank
Is there
you.
anything you want to say before we close?
First of all, I want to thank you for being one of the best sister girlfriends there is. It's just to me a bonus blessing to be able to work with somebody like you, with your integrity and just your energy. The things you do outside of work, I'm tired thinking about them, but I love it. So I was like, let me write a book, and that's doing too much. But I just want to say this to people. You know what? Your life, you are here on purpose. Your life
Mhm.
has a purpose.
Yes.
You are not an accident.
Mhm.
And if you if you are making moves in your life and decisions based on things that happened in the past, if you're saying negative things about yourself,
Yes.
you're not
Mhm.
living your best life. Please, look forward. Read the book as an example if that
Yes.
helps you, but do the work you need to do so that you can live the best life that you can. You can
Yes.
be the best version of yourself, and that God has a plan for you. There's not a mistake, and you
Yes.
in that plan you will, and you can fulfill that plan and be happy and be
Yes.
joyful and look forward and face forward doing that. And so that is what I would want for you,
Mhm.
anyone who's listening. And I wish you all the best, and I wish you the best days and life and years ahead of you. The best is ahead of you. Best days ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Renee. And to all of those that are watching, please like, subscribe, and share this information out to your friends and family who would benefit from this discussion. Healthy Heart Nation does heart-to-heart conversations.